welcome everybody to the session today. Thank you very much for joining us. You'll see on the screen a wee reminder today just to turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Obviously I forgot to do that there, but there is going to be a recording made of this session as well, so it's just for your own comfort and things as well. Just remember to do that. Feel free to post comments, questions and thoughts into the chat window, and when we get to the discussion stage we'll probably edit that out of the final version of today's session. I put a couple of things to do with accessibility as well. Feel free to turn on live captions if that is helpful to you, and you can do that if you have a look on the top, there's a little bit with more actions and you can turn on live captions in that. It's the 3 dots or ellipses at the top there. So I'm just going to move on to this slide. This is welcome to the Secondary Sciences Network. A huge part of this is about this model for network learning, and I'm sure you'll recognise the model for professional learning on the right hand side there, and on the left hand side that model for network learning. What we're hoping to do today is just to introduce you to some of the things that practitioners are doing, and today we're joined with practitioners from Dingwall Academy who are going to be sharing their practice with us, and we've also got the opportunity to share and chat and perhaps create some new knowledge, some things that we want to learn about as well today. So I just popped that up there. We are going to be using a Padlet as well today, so I'm going to pop that into the chat just now. And in the Padlet there's a copy of the presentation that is being used today, so you don't have to take lots of notes. And there's also a couple of questions that the practitioners at Dingwall wanted to ask, and there's also space for you to add other questions and comments as well, or you can just pop them into the chat as we go. So my name is Janie Irving. I'm one of the STEM education officers with Education Scotland, and joining me today from Education Scotland are Ian Menzies and Margaret Craw. And joining us today from Dingwall Academy, we're going to hear from Rob, Andy and Michael as they tell us about their journey with their BGE course, and we're going to be diving into their data and what they do with it. A key aspect, I suppose, for us all to keep in mind today is thinking about what we want to assess in science and why, and how we use the data that we collect to change our practice, to improve feedback to our pupils, and ultimately to support our learners' progression throughout school. So, unless there's any questions just now, and I'll pause for a wee second, if there's not, I will hand over. Anything just now coming up? In that case, I will hand over to the team from Dingwall. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy. Can you move on to the next slide for me, please? That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so a while ago we were looking at our BGE course, and we decided that we were doing end of unit tests, and all we were doing was a pass or a fail based on whether they had managed to get greater than 50% in the test. And that wasn't really giving us any real data about our students. It wasn't giving us a full picture. All we were really checking is their knowledge and understanding and problem solving skills. So we decided to revamp our courses, keeping to what we were doing originally, which was 6 topics covered over the course of the year, 2 based around biology, 2 based around chemistry, and 2 based around physics. And then we decided what we wanted to do is we wanted to try and then create unit tests, which then tested their scientific skills at level 3, level 2, and moving on to extending it to level 4. And we wanted more than just knowledge and understanding. So we wanted to put something in place that we could then help our students progress through the science courses. So we wanted to have something with some scaffolding in there, scaffolding in there, so that we could help them to build up to become better scientists. And also we felt that the courses we were offering were not giving our students good access into the kind of skills that we needed them to be developing into S3 and into S4. So we weren't kind of giving them the right kind of skills for when they get into S4 and we're looking at AVUs and we're looking at assignments. We wanted to include some more scaffolding in those early years to help build into that. Can you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so what we decided to do is we decided that we were going to first of all introduce a standardized scientific write-up, and we were going to split this into various different levels, a level 2, a level 3 and a level 4. We decided that what we'd have is and we'd also introduce a scientific literacy task, which would also be split into level 2, level 3 and level 4 to introduce to our S1, S2 students as we move forward. We still continue to have an end of topic assessment where we are then monitoring their knowledge and understanding and problem style questions, but we split that down so we now have what we consider to be level 2 style questions, level 3 style questions, and we're now looking at introducing level 4 styles of questions into our assessments. So the scientific write-ups, we wanted to make sure that the scientific write-ups we were doing were standardized to give us good numerical data, which the students could then process. And we wanted our literacy tasks to be based on internet research in an aspect of science which is relevant to the topic they were studying at that particular point in time. Okay, can you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so at the moment we collect data and we enter that data into a spreadsheet. This is a typical example here on the screen of what we've got. We've got biology cycle 1 and cycle 2, so that's the 2 topics in biology, chemistry and physics. And here we've got it broken down into level 2 style questions, level 3 style questions and problem solving questions. So to achieve a pass in any of the knowledge and understanding sections, then they need to score a certain score, which at the moment is sitting at 7 out of a possible 10 to get a level 2 in knowledge and understanding. Same in the level 3 for knowledge and understanding. And in the problem solving, it depends on their marks, whether we mark them down as a level 2 or a level 3. And the spreadsheet just basically works all of that out for us when we input the data from their tests. We also then, for reporting purposes, we wanted to include that into our reporting processes. So when a student has managed to pass level 2 knowledge and understanding on 3 occasions, that becomes a pass on their reporting to say that they are working at level 2. And obviously when they get 6 passes at level 3, that moves on and gives them a level 3 on that section. And again, the same again when it comes to problem solving, so that we can then track exactly, and our parents have access to this data as it is being used so they can see their pupils' progress. Okay, can you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so here is a typical example of one of our level 2 scientific write-ups. So here you can see that what we've done to help scaffold it for the pupils is we've used missing words with a word bank to give them a chance when they're doing the experiment to work through this and to fill in the missing words as they are doing it. There is a table for them to collect data. There is information on safety. There is information on the actual method for the experiment and space included for them to draw a diagram. We have space for them to do a table, a conclusion and an evaluation as they work through. And once they've completed this successfully 3 times, they've got a tick in each of those sections, then they can move on to the next level. Okay, so can we move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, here we go, level 3 inquiry. We see now the level of scaffolding has been reduced. Again, we're still using those missing words exercises, but they no longer have a word bank. So they have to put the correct words into there. On the table on the graph, we have no information input on the table and no information put into the graph. So again, they have to put that information on as they work their way through. And then can you move on to the next slide for me, please? Our level 4s are based on the National 4 Outcome 1. So they just get a blank piece of paper and then they are expected to write out the scientific write-up, going through all of the normal procedures, the aim, the variables, safety, method, results with a table and a graph, and then a conclusion and an evaluation on the experiment. Okay. If we can just move on to the next slide for me, please. Here are some examples of our scientific literacy skills. So here we're looking, students have level 2 level 3 criteria when they're in S1, and in S2 we move on and we introduce the level 4 criteria, because some of our students, as they're getting into S2, are getting to that kind of level 4 just there. So you can see there is a step up in complexity between each level. Can we move on to the next slide, and I'll pass you over to my colleague Michael, who's going to go through how we use this data.
Good afternoon, folks. Hi, my name is Michael Sharkey. I'm a physics teacher at Dingwall Academy. I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you about how we use SNSA data to inform our practice here at Dingwall. To start off with then, obviously the SNSA data comes from the P7 information, so it's really used as our base level when our S1 classes come in. We have this data at our fingertips, and it allows us to adjust our practice based on what we see. So if I take my class, for example, like most of us, I'm sure we have a wide spread of abilities, and we can see that in the SNSA data. I was more used to SOSCA, to be honest, and of course in the last few years it's been replaced with the SNSA information. So on the website, we look at the banding, and in particular the descriptions of the bands. So at P7 level, they should be between bands 6 to 11, and there are really nice exemplifications of what we can expect for pupils to be able to achieve through numeracy, reading and writing at these levels. So being a physicist, I obviously go straight for the numeracy outcomes straight away, and within my class I've got 4 pupils who are band 11, top of the pile, and then I've also got pupils who are around about the band 6. So of course we're talking about a wide spread of numeracy ability, and of course because of that, this is where, as Andy said, the scaffolding comes in. So to kind of put it in perspective, you know yourselves, when they come in, we're looking for such skills as averaging, interpretation of graphs. In the past, this was always something we'd be hoping for the P7s to be coming in with. I'm certainly seeing at this stage, due to the last 2 years of disruption, that I would say the bands are coming in lower, and because of that, we are at a point where we're having to teach these numeracy skills, the band 10 and 11 skills, so the percentages, the averaging, and this kind of throws up a few problems. I know in the past I'd always expected pupils to be coming in with these skills already, so I'm finding myself having to teach averaging and percentages a lot more. So we've had quite a lot of liaison with the maths department, making sure that our approach is consistent to the way that we teach these numeracy skills. On top of that, as Andy showed you, we have, for example, our write-up sheets. We've got support scaffolding to help the band 6 pupils, and extension materials going into the level 4 for our band 11. So it's that kind of base level that allows us, straight in week number 1, we can adjust, differentiate our learning so that everyone is catered for. In terms of the reading and writing bands, obviously, as you saw there with Andy, we had the investigated write-ups. So we know straight away, is it level 2, is it level 3 that we're going to be giving the kids? What level of scaffolding is required? Could you put on the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so we had a meeting with Janie recently, and we were looking at this very powerful package. I'm really excited to get to use it, called PowerB. We've not had a go at using it yet, but you can see here, these are our current 4th years, and these were some of their scores when they were in P7. So you can see it gives you a really nice snapshot of their numeracy, writing and reading skills for the cohort, and immediately you can see, as scientists, it's jumping out at us that the numeracy skills, we've got this big 91 in the middle bracket, which really, compared to the reading and writing, it should be a bit more, a bit lower than that for the ambers. So I guess it's not so much a whole class thing. This is more as a school and an ASG, how can we interpret these results and put things into place to work on these numeracy skills. So yeah, that's some of the ways in which we use the SNSA data. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to Rob to take it from here. Thank you very much.
Hi there, good afternoon. I'm Rob Urquhart, chemistry teacher here at Dingwall, and I've been kind of looking into, in the last few months, how we sort of use some of our data and how we can get a bit more information out of it. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Again, as Michael said there, we've been introduced to this Power BI software, and this shows us a bit of what it can do. We, as Andy showed you, we've been using a more traditional method of numbers in a spreadsheet, but we use it for all the same things that you guys obviously do as well, so our tracking and monitoring pupil progress, and of course, most importantly, informing next steps for learning, and reporting and feedback to pupils and parents, making interventions when we need to, and identifying strengths and weaknesses with pupils. And this shows some data for an anonymous pupil of ours across their first and second year tests in each of the 3 subjects, which gives a really good visual representation, makes that data that we've collected on them much easier to kind of access, but also easier to show pupils how they're doing, how their progress is, and what they need to work on. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Similarly, we have data from our skills, so from our investigative write-up skills, and we can see here this is data that's been collected for a whole year group at level 2, and looking at the total sum of marks across a year group in each of the sections that we're marking them against, while they complete their write-ups, we can see that presenting data in tables and graphs and identifying variables that they have to work with within each of their investigations seems to be slightly weaker than other areas, such as maybe like writing methods, contributing to their procedure, coming up with an aim. So as my colleagues have said, obviously we can use this to inform next steps. We can use this to identify the sort of scaffolding that we're using and who needs extra help, and then ultimately the sort of level of progress that they're working at and the levels that they've achieved. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Personally, over the last couple of months, I've been looking into the level of challenge within our tests across BGE. Now we can see here that there's obviously a sort of a deviation of sort of average scores at each level within knowledge and understanding and problem solving. And when marking tests, I noticed that there were a number of pupils that were scoring kind of like flipped results, if you like. They were scoring higher in their level 3 section of their tests compared to the level 2. So speaking to colleagues to see if anyone else was noticing similar things, we started delving into some of our sort of historic data to see whether it was an issue with our tests or whether it was down to something else. So we've been using this data to ultimately work on an internal sort of moderation exercise to check our tests against themselves. What we've looked at is averaging results for the past 3 year groups, and obviously we have to acknowledge that there has been disruption. We do have for some areas of BGE over the last couple of years, gaps in our data from when there may have been distant learning and whatnot. But using the data that we have got, we've averaged scores from year groups in each test and then looked at how they differ from each other across each year group to try and normalise our own BGE tests against themselves to try to ensure that we've got the same level of challenge at all of our level 2 test questions across all of our BGE tests, and the same at level 3 and the same at our problem solving. And we have found that from the data that we have, we have a level of deviation across that. So it's something that we're looking into at the moment, whether some need to be made more challenging or some need to possibly be made a little less challenging. And that has led us on to questioning whether our approach, how strong and effective our approach is, and how other people are taking, or how other people are working with this as well. Could you move on to the next slide, please? So ultimately, this has raised questions within our department, which is why we've kind of put this presentation together, and ultimately want to kind of open a conversation with colleagues across the country and see what everyone else is doing as well. Of course, we use the benchmarks for guidance, but ultimately our questions are, we've presented to you today how we are going about it, but we completely understand there is no standardised sort of method of assessing or tracking BGE. So what are other people doing? How are other people collecting data? And how are people deciding what constitutes level 2 or level 3? As you've seen today, we're constructing our tests with level 2 questions and level 3 questions and problem solving questions. Are other people taking a more holistic approach, or are other people following a similar structure to ourselves? At what stage are other people or other schools deciding that a level has been achieved? And these are things that we would love to hear about from other schools, and ultimately try to sort of hone our own approach and hopefully maybe contribute to other people's approach as well. So thank you very much for listening to us talking about what we do here at Dingwall, and hopefully we can share some good, interesting information with each other to help everyone out.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to go back a couple of slides as well, because there's been a few questions in the chat around just the Power BI programme itself. So maybe allow Margaret and myself, we can maybe just handle a few of those questions, and then we'll go on to the questions from the team. Margaret, do you want to come in and just explain a bit about what you did?
Yeah, I think that there's two clear aspects here. I think the really important part about this session today is about the approach of using data in order to look at our next steps, is interrogating what we've got and then looking at it. And then there's that side part, which is the sort of nice geeky part, which is what you use in order to harvest and elevate that data to something that's a wee bit more visual. So that's the nuts and bolts, is the mechanics of the Power BI, but really what's at the heart of this whole session today is the approach that Dingwall have taken in saying, you know what, we get numbers, we get all this data, but what's it actually telling us, and what are we going to do about it in order to inform our next steps to help our learners and to help us move on our journey of looking at the our assessments and things like that, and also to look at your demographics in front of you. So Janie's got up here, thanks Janie for that, we've got up here the SNASA data. So straight away when we looked at the SNASA data, and you know what it's like, if you look in Excel, you get all of this data there, and it's all in, you might have 200 people or 240 people in a cohort for 1 year group, and the numbers are populated there, and that looks great, but unless you actually have a sort of mind like an IBM computer, it's quite hard to use that data. So what we've done is we've just used a program that can easily do this, and Excel can do that as well, but this is a really good way of being able to show that. So in a school, if I was looking at the SNASA data that was coming in, I get my cohort coming to me in August, September, I already know that this cohort, I've got, you can see there the difference in numeracy, you can see the difference in reading and in writing, and looking at the demographics within your class, you know that when you are setting your first homeworks or your first learning experiences in the class, and also any assessments, that if some of the questions are around numeracy and you know that these certain individuals within your class set have scored a little bit less in the SNASA data, then that's not new data to you, but it does explain a little bit. So therefore it helps you to say, should I therefore be putting in that little bit of scaffolding around some of their homework or assessments? It gives you a clearer picture of where that learner is, but also gives you an absolute clearer picture that if they move from, say, a 4 out of 10 in a problem solving to a 6 out of 10, that's a huge success for that learner, and that's the success we should be celebrating. Jenny, I don't know if you want to say any more about the SNASA data here.
Not specifically. The one that I picked out that really resonated with me personally when I looked at your data was around the information around the practical write-up, because again, I'm just sort of thinking back to, as a class teacher, if I was to look at this, and again, I admit I really do like a graph. I find it just much easier to have a visual to actually to see what's happening. And I know that I would use this to perhaps, particularly if I was looking at my individual class, to think, okay, right, I can see that there's certain aspects of this process that my pupils are coping well with, they're making good progress with. Are there particular things that I want to pick up on? And I think that's the sort of things that were being discussed today. You know, for example, the sort of presenting data was an area that Dingwall were saying, you know, we felt that we were going to have to do more work around that, in particular with this particular cohort, but things like variables as well. And again, and I always come back to, and I was very pleased when I hear Dingwall saying about, you know, that clustered approach and things as well, about, you know, having that common language, particularly around something like scientific inquiry skills, can be so valuable as a way to support learners all the way from early level to fourth level. So with things like variables and things like that, how do we introduce that? When does that get introduced? When do we start talking using like your independent, dependent variables and so on? I've just spotted actually that a question's come in, so I just wanted to put that to the teachers at Dingwall. It's from Angela, just saying very interesting and asking if the whole class does the level 2 investigation template 3 times, and wondering about stretch and challenge. Would some pupils already be able to do level 3? So I'm just wondering who wants to pick up on that question from Dingwall.
Oh. Sorry, we missed that. Yeah.
That's all right. As David's popped in actually something in there as well, that every pupil starts with level 2 and a number of pupils will progress to level 3 by partway through S1. So they're not sort of staying at a particular level if they're clearly rocketing through that. And again, I suppose you might have an idea of who might be able to make that progress quite quickly using the SNASA data and things as well. Folks, I have put into the chat as well the Padlet, but I also am aware that it's maybe just a good time to have an opportunity to chat. So I'm actually going to, unless Margaret wants to pick up on another aspect of the data that was shown here, I was maybe going to stop presenting. So Margaret, is there anything else you wanted to pick up on?
No, I think everything's really been talked about. I think it'd be really interesting to hear the discussion and get people talking about how they use data and asking questions back to Dingwall. So yeah, let's get on with the crack, really.
Okay, so as I said, I've popped the Padlet into the chat. It might be helpful to bring this up for yourself, or you can use just the chat function if it's easier. There's a number of questions that my colleague Dingwall asking in terms of what data are you collecting, how do we decide on level 2 or 3 questions. So let's just see. Now,